Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. Are you feeling stuck after running employee engagement surveys, wondering what actionable steps you can take? Today, we're diving into the world of team dynamics and the science of making work more meaningful and productive. Joining us is Michael McCarroll, co-founder and CEO of Teamraderie, a pioneering platform designed to enhance how teams work together by applying cutting-edge research from Harvard Business School and Stanford University. In this episode, we explore how to turn employee engagement surveys into transformative actions that uplift your team's engagement and productivity. With Teamraderie, Michael's at the helm of transforming how we think about team performance and collaboration in the modern workplace. Here are the essential insights they'll uncover together. First, turning survey data into action. Learn how to interpret and act on your own employee engagement surveys to create a more dynamic and engaged workplace. Second, effective team building. They'll discuss which activities truly foster trust and interaction within teams, moving beyond traditional team building exercises to strategies that make a lasting impact. Finally, the power of team-first thinking. Discover why prioritizing team outcomes over individual accomplishments isn't just good rhetoric. It's essential for creating a thriving, collaborative environment where everyone feels valued and invested in the team's success. Prepare to rethink how you engage with your team with practical advice from the forefront of organizational psychology and team dynamics. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group. And today I'm joined by Michael McCarroll. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Teamraderie, which is a great company name for the Future of Teamwork podcast. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dane. Good to be here.
You bet. So for the benefit of our listeners, could you provide a little bit of your backstory? What brought you to this time and place when you're building the Teamraderie platform?
Right. So Teamraderie is very much a people-focused platform. It's about raising the productivity, engagement of the people in your company. You wouldn't know it, right? But I usually that's something that's reserved for people that have spent their life thinking about people. I actually started off as an engineer, a mechanical engineer by training, designed semiconductor components for several years. And I spent a few years at McKinsey as a consultant in the United States, and then subsequently have started a couple of software companies, ultimately acquired by bigger companies. And so I've spent time in early stage companies and in big companies. And spent my time at a place like McKinsey, which spends its time, usually looking at big companies and assessing what's wrong. And so I became really interested in, the problem of how do you take if most companies have actually really excellent talent, and I've been on teams with lots of really talented people, and yet the teams I lead, I know I've often certainly failed to have 1 + 1 = 3, or sometimes even 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah,
and I think all of us are probably relatively gifted functional managers. And we all have a lot we could gain if we were just way more aware of how we manage people. And, I started to becoming really reflective about it and realized how off I was on a lot of things personally, and figured, hey, if I'm that bad, a lot of people must be that bad also. So I got really into the research that's been done about how you create genuinely effective teams. And what I was fascinated by was the techniques of what you have to do. You actually read about them in Harvard Business Review or Sloan or these different journals that come out, and they look pretty interesting. But when it comes down to how do you do it, it's really a big question. So I was really interested in, well, how could you take all the wisdom? You could take the wisdom from HBR and MIT Sloan and every interesting article you read about leadership. What if you could funnel that down to individual managers? And wouldn't that make every team better? And geez, wouldn't that make every company a lot better? And felt like a really noble, interesting thing to do. So that's what we started building a few years ago.
That's awesome. And you talk about how off I was, and I don't think there are many leaders out there that don't have those moments, particularly with everything we've come through in the last few years with digital technology and pandemic and hybrid work. Like, I don't think anyone really turns up every day and feels like they're on top of their game for getting the most out of their people and teams. What was it particularly that you saw that was frustrating to you before you started this platform that kind of made you think we're not getting the best out of my people, or I'm seeing damage here?
Honestly, here's what it was: is when for most of us, right? If you were working during the pandemic, what you noticed was suddenly you stopped doing things one way and you had to start doing them another. And I think what I noticed was that it was, and this whole concept of distributed work. Now, we've had distributed work. It wasn't a pandemic thing, right? It goes back to 2000, and when you started to not have all your engineers in one building. You had them in San Francisco and Austin, and then
Yeah.
San Francisco and Austin and Mumbai, right? Like globalization, all that. And what became clear, around 2000 was that this trend towards more distributed teams was going to accelerate. And, sure enough, during the pandemic, people relaxed the need to hire people that were only adjacent to offices, and they would hire people, anywhere. And obviously great for talent mobility, wonderful for improving equity in the workplace. But it created the situation where if it was tough to be a manager before, geez, it's even harder when you don't get to see your team. And, even harder when the routines of getting work done, not only can you not see them, but you're not always familiar with them. And so it struck me as that a lot of things were going to have to get rethought. It was an important time. We always talk about manager reskilling, upskilling, but hybrid work, I would argue, is probably the most significant change that managers have gone through in 20 years. And it requires you to rethink a lot of how you manage. And so, a lot of CHROs are pushing new programs around that. And to us, it felt like a time to be just modern and thinking about, well, if you want your managers to be better, how do you make them into the people that could create truly effective teams?
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about moments, because you used the word at the beginning there on engagement and productivity. But when we were introducing ourselves before the show, you said we create these moments for people to have connection. Tell me more about that, because that's very different from some of the off-the-shelf engagement surveys and other tools that we've seen used.
Well, so there's a whole industry around engagement surveys, right? So Workday, UKG, Qualtrics, Microsoft Viva. Lots of different ways to measure how engaged your employees are. So I think, SaaS companies have the measurement market covered, right? We do a good job. As you know, you do your employee survey, you might do it once a year, you might do it twice, 4 times a year. What happens afterward is you've measured, how engaged people are or aren't, and you have some sense of the drivers of what's leading to a lack of engagement. The CHRO will compile that and we'll share it with everybody. And then what happens is usually nothing. One of our customers is a very well-known platform for business operations, business execution. The CEO there, he came into the job like 3 years earlier, and he said, look, we do this employee survey. We do it in March, and we broadcast the results in April. And then we spend 2 months talking about what we're going to do. Nothing changes by July, and we survey everybody again in September. And we wonder why the score never changes.
Or gets worse.
Well, yeah, it does. Well, I mean, and data says, obviously, the reason people don't fill out surveys is because they don't think anything's going to change, right? So it has this unfortunate impact of obviously leading to worker apathy, disengagement, et cetera. So, your point, we've got a whole industry around measurement and reporting. And I think it does a totally reasonable job of doing exactly that.
Yeah.
What's lacking is action. Mm-hmm. And the really interesting thing that we found, right? So as you know, we started as a collaboration of Harvard Business School and Stanford faculty. who had done research on how you create trust on a team, how you create uh, connection on a team, how you create psychological safety. So these characteristics, I think we all talk about them. We want teams to be trusting and psychologically safe and all that. But the steps you would take on how to do it are pretty unclear. So what we've done is we've taken the insights from maybe 36 pieces of peer-reviewed research and turned those into experiences that a team shares together. So now, right after you do your employee survey, if you do it in March, you get your results in April. The manager, right after she gets her results, she's got a trust challenge on her team. She would do a Teamraderie experience that focuses on trust. But what she's now doing is taking a piece of peer-reviewed research that shows how you actually move the needle. And she's doing that with her team. And, our results obviously is that it moves the needle. But, the interesting opportunity I think that we saw was to take something that's extremely well measured, which is engagement,
Yeah.
but which nobody does a good job of improving on any kind of time horizon and solving for that.
That's cool. So I want to dive into a little bit more to these experiences. But before I do that, I saw one of your posts that said, post the deployment of Teamraderie and these experiences, you can see as much as a 30% productivity lift. It's productivity, not engagement, correct?
Well, the primary metric that people have access to is engagement.
Got it.
People have engagement metrics through all those survey tools we just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
We've had our customers often have a bespoke productivity metric. One of our customers is a very well-known, very large tech company known for inventing all sorts of things. One of them is a really interesting metric around how productive their engineers are. And so they use their own proprietary metric around engineer productivity. You just do it lines of code, challenge of code, et cetera. And as you can imagine, every company, only really big companies with lots of resources actually measure productivity really, other than with salespeople.
Yeah.
So some of our customers will measure productivity, and then everybody has access to retention data, right? Do you actually retain your employees? And so we can measure about an 18 to 30% lift in engagement. So that's those surveys you do. And about a 15% lift in productivity, largely driven by effectively people collaborating better, right?
Yeah.
And then the attrition drop is pretty obvious, which is if you start to see more value in the people you work with, if you see that your manager is actually investing in the caliber of her team, you have more regard for her, and you don't take the call from the recruiter, or
Yeah.
you don't take the job when it gets offered to you if you're talking to people. So those are the metrics people care about. Obviously the retention metric is the easiest to convert to dollars. Productivity is pretty easy to convert to dollars, but it's always such a big number. It's hard to believe. And then engagement, everybody has, but very few CEOs make meaningful decisions off of, where's my engagement really?
Yeah. That's cool. That's powerful on a few different levels. So let's tie back into your example there. The manager, she comes in, there's a trust problem in the team. She does a trust experience. Is that something that's concierged, kind of scripted in your platform, or is there a human in the loop? Is she being coached through the exercise? How does that play out?
Right. Yeah. So Teamraderie experiences are, as the name would suggest, team based. And I can tell you why this number, but assume a team of like 5 to 15 people, right? 8-person engineering team, 10-person marketing team, whatever. The team, like with most training, you say, oh, I'm going to send my manager to training. She needs help. Okay.
Yeah.
And, of course she does, but, you kind of go off to training and like you watch some videos and then you come back and you've got a manager that's now watched some videos and she needs to go interact with the same team again. The approach that we took is actually the manager and her team all do this together. And the reason is like, as you can imagine, in anything interpersonal, it's not that like it's all the manager's fault. Of course it's not. It's interpersonal, right? It's teams, it's interpersonal dynamics, human to human. So the experiences are all team-based. So you take a group of people that has to collaborate with each other day to day, functional team, cross-functional team, doesn't matter. They share an experience together. The experience is live hosted. So there's a live host, somebody who's got genuine expertise and credentials, and they actually lead the team through doing something interesting together. Now, from a design perspective, we wanted it to never feel like an HR exercise. Now, our customer is usually the CHRO. That said, the CHRO is, more aware than anybody that if it feels like a top-down HR thing, it's not fun. So the experiences that the team will do, they're fun, they're engaging. There's an experience they can do with NASCAR. There's an experience they can do with the head of intelligence, former head of intelligence for the U.S. Navy. They'll do experiences where they use a venue other than your world of work to introduce you to ideas about how other teams collaborate, how Navy SEAL teams collaborate, how NASCAR pit crew teams collaborate.
Yeah.
And, it's called analogic thinking. And humans love analogic thinking. We get ideas much better if we do analogic thinking, because if you ask me to reflect on my own work, I'm going to get all defensive.
Mm-hmm.
But man, if I'm talking about how a pit crew team works or how an NFL team works, I'm much more likely to see patterns, right? So it relies highly on analogic thinking to get people to see different ways of approaching the same problem.
Yeah.
But you have the whole team experience it together, have the same insight together, and not hit people over the head with the insight. It's live hosted because the host kind of leads you to the insight. And, there's this thing called the epiphany effect. So the epiphany
I've heard
effect,
of this.
Yeah, epiphany effect is like if you and I, this is why we like our college friends, or this is why we have great memories of college, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you learn, you're exposed to something new and you see the world differently, you impart the really positive characteristics on everybody who is around you. So this is, this is why it's actually good to travel overseas with people is, you see new things and you'll have epiphanies and you'll do it with people. So it's called the epiphany effect. You basically take the epiphany effect and you drop it into the middle of the workday. So now you and the 7 guys on your team effectively have an epiphany together at 3 p.m. And again, Matt, you don't do this every week. You don't do it every month even. But if you do this 3-4 times a year, it has a big change on how you perceive the people you work with.
Yeah. I like that. And it creates a lot of muscle memory, confidence, activation, I would imagine, in those teams because of that.
Well, it becomes, so, that will go from organization research to language. But so, there's this word that people throw around a lot, right? Which is camaraderie, I'm on a great team together. We've just got great camaraderie, right? Or, morale's kind of low. There's no real camaraderie, right? People use that word a lot. So the word originates like a French word, and a French word with a Latin root. Latin root is comma, which is, if you know Latin, right? Comma means bed. And it literally means if you think of it if you spend the night with somebody, meaning just not in the way that you might be thinking, but if you have experiences with somebody, you build this
companionship
shared experience. So you need to have, if you want camaraderie as a team, you have to create these shared touch points. And that's really, you have to be intentional about it. The shared touch point isn't, hey, we went and had beer together. And, the shared touch point has to be something like, no, we actually had a shared interesting moment together. We learned something about the world at the same time.
That's interesting. So paintballing probably isn't going to cut it.
Well, and then you run into the whole accessibility point. So,
Great point.
I'm a white male, so I have, pretty easy for me to go out and drink beers or shoot a paintball gun. But good Lord, right? Imagine if you're pregnant and someone says, hey, let's go do paintballing, right?
You're out.
Exactly. And you should be, nor is it effective, right? I mean, you can argue paintballing is fun, but what changes about how you perceive your colleagues after you do it?
Yeah.
I used to spend time in consulting, and in consulting, you had this unlimited budget. You could go out with the client and take them to the priciest dinner you could find. And the whole point was to literally like buy wine and get people to relax around you and create these moments so that you would build trust.
Yeah.
Um, Again, easy to do if you're kind of a single male. And if I didn't have kids at the time, I've got 3 now, but like I wouldn't or couldn't go do those things now.
Yeah. That's cool. It actually reminds me, we had a guest on the show last year, Chris Shambro, who's the gratitude guru.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing these experiences where he would bring these different people in and around a dinner table, and they would share a couple of questions, which were quite deep and insightful questions about who would you give thanks to that you haven't thanked enough for an important, influence on your life. And this whole group of people would create this huge connection because they were sharing something very meaningful. It wasn't about their day job or where they're at right now. It was very accessible, and that created massive connection and impact.
The way that's a great example. So I like that a lot, right? Because it turns out that if you want to build trust, so if you want to build actually trust, and the best way for me to trust you, you don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get me to share something slightly revealing, slightly vulnerable, okay? Doesn't have to be fetishes, just something, okay?
Yeah.
The moment I utter it, assuming you don't laugh at me, okay? The moment I utter it, I actually have a higher opinion of you.
Yes.
And I believe you're more trustworthy only because I've already shared something with you. So there's a study done it. It was Chicago Booth and UMich did some really interesting studies on this. So, you take Chris's example, right, of the dinner party and the thoughtful question. I think we've all been to those dinner parties before.
Yeah.
And, if you think about it, it's a great example. Right? Take Chris's example. At the dinner party, where you're invited to the dinner party, you don't know anybody that well.
Yes.
The impactful thing isn't necessarily that you're breaking bread together, although that's good. The impactful thing is actually those questions that take the guy who's sitting next to you, who's kind of a stranger, and suddenly you realize he has a tortured relationship with his father or struggles with something else. And you suddenly see him as human and likable. And then the moment you utter that yourself, you see all these people in the room as your trusted friends.
Yeah.
And so as you can see, it doesn't take that much to do this, but that's probably not going to happen in a paintball game.
Yeah, true. No, that's a great point. So playing out that whole dinner table environment, you're talking about your experiences, whether it's the NASCAR experience or otherwise. Are they 100% virtual? Do you get teams together in a room together being facilitated? Is it a mix? How does that play out?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, it doesn't actually matter where the team is.
Right. That's cool.
So the question that Chris does at the dinner thing, again, the primary effect, he's getting some positive effect from everybody's having a meal. He's getting most of his effect from the fact that you're learning something about the other guy, other than, you got 3 kids that live in the town next door. Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually matter. We ran these tests with that did experiences all in person, teams that did experiences hybrid, and teams that did experiences remote. And there's no material difference in result from everybody in person and everybody remote. There's a little bit of a dip with hybrid, and it usually is driven by some of the challenges you just have actually with literally hearing everybody. And there's some, as you know, with hybrid, it creates some in-group, out-group dynamics. So it just becomes very visible, right? Who's in and who's out. That said, people have also compared this to what happens if you just let people go to an office together or make them go to an office together.
Yeah.
And it just, intentionality blows the doors off of letting things happen and hoping for water cooler magic
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. That's smart. What about, you talked about in-group, out-group in the hybrid setting, but you throw some teams together, I'm guilty of this, and someone takes over, they take up too much space, or they drive a decision because of their authority or their
Right.
extroversion or whatever. We were doing a cooking class, and it was actually a competition. We did a mystery basket. So we broke out into 2 teams the other week, and I wanted to go big and bold. So I took my team down a pathway that had a low probability of execution, and we failed and we lost. And afterwards, I was like, oh man, I wonder if I influenced my team to maybe not benefit from the full experience in that setting. So then I'm sort of, kicking myself later on for thinking about what the dynamics were. In your experiences, do you see that? Do you see like a leader may kind of take people down a path that maybe isn't the right pathway to go, or are your facilitators on top of all of those dynamics?
Well, I mean, look, as you know, when you've got, the way you should look at our experiences is you've got a host who is effectively a catalyst for a petri dish of humans that are a team. And, the advantage of being the catalyst and kind of the objective third party is not to call you out, but if, one member of the party is sort of a little over titrated,
Yeah.
you can impose some balance on the group.
Nice.
And let's say that you had actually been totally uninspiring and not encouraged people to do anything fit. You might have gotten some encouragement, or the team might have gotten some encouragement to think a little bit bolder.
Yeah.
So, our hosts do that. The most important thing our hosts do, because the experiences that, that Teamraderie leads, it's not that they are performative. You're not making a souffle. Presume you were.
That's what I was trying to go for.
Souffle like
Yeah.
The true objective that our hosts have actually is to get, and that we have a metric for this, which is to get all, say, 11 people on the team to effectively communicate approximately equally. Now, as you know, that never happens. Some communicate more, some communicate less. However, the well-done facilitation or well-done hosting actually creates time and space for those who don't jump in to have a chance to jump in. So the hosts explicitly do that with the goal, in an explicit design goal, is heterogeneity of ideas expressed from the broadest number of attendees.
Neat. That's really neat, because you'll see there'll be a neurodivergent person in the room. And so when you're throwing out a brainstorm and you're forcing people into a response, that person may shoot out some responses, or they may want to just take some time to process it and sit back and it takes work. So it's nice that you're removing that work from the team leader and allowing them to be part of the experience themselves.
Well, the explicit design objective is actually this: every member of a team has a value, and you can call that value their salary. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you ever seen this done, right? You ever look at how many dollars you're actually spending to have a meeting of 10 people together? Okay.
Yeah. It's scary.
It's extraordinary. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, you look at how many dollars of you're spending actually for every hour. So the explicit design purpose, is to get everybody in the room to see everybody else in the room as having a valuable perspective. And ultimately, that's what leads to, I described the productivity boosts that people have measured. What they attribute that to, the best study that we saw done on this, the productivity lift was really attributed to not that the guys coded any faster, right? These were engineers.
Yeah.
It was not that they coded any faster. It was actually, interestingly, that they coded less and borrowed more.
Mm.
Okay. Which is simply to say they were more willing to ask for help. Others were more willing to, if you will, drop what they were doing and share a routine they'd written that's like almost identical to what the guy was trying to write. And therefore you had more effectively reuse of code.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty, like at some level, that engineering example is actually pretty easy to understand. You're not having 10 engineers I don't say reinventing the wheel, but effectively
Yeah.
inventing the wheel multiple times.
Yeah.
It's promoting the kind of collaboration that leads to efficient code use and therefore productivity and therefore simpler code that's easier to manage in the future. And so how does that come? Well, it only comes really if I start to see value from everybody else on the team and vice versa.
Yeah. That's an interesting call out. It actually takes me back again into some of Chris's work on gratitude around sometimes asking for help is a way of, it's a gift. You're showing gratitude and appreciation for what someone else might bring. So it actually creates more belonging in the team,
Right.
above and beyond the efficiency of the code base. So it's
Right.
like a double play.
Yeah. Well, so one of the founding advisors, co-creators with us is Amy Edmondson from her business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, she has what's called a journey on our platform. You do 4 experiences that are designed to create psychological safety. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
2 of the experiences explicitly go after creating enough belonging and trust that you're willing to ask for help, and then establishing norms on the team where when somebody says, I need help on something, effectively your obligation isn't to as in the NASCAR example you and I were talking about earlier, your obligation isn't to getting your own work done, it's to getting the team's work done.
Yeah.
And a characteristic you actually see on high-performing athletic teams, but you see it on high-performing teams of knowledge workers as well. And it's in the organizational behavior world, we call it psychological safety. And that's the name that gets thrown around a lot at work right now. It's like, I want my team to be psychologically safe. Well, what it means is it doesn't just happen if you say it. You have to establish belonging first, and then get people to be comfortable, willing to ask for help.
I like that. And you mentioned the NASCAR example. I was intrigued by the way you brought that up before the show. So let's share that with the listeners. So you were talking about the exercise on moving from task focus to outcome focus. So could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
I'm not a racing fan, at least I wasn't until recently. So in the sport of NASCAR, right? So there's Formula One where these beautiful cars drive up into this precise location, 20 humans descend on it and, almost beautifully change the tires. It takes them like 3 seconds. NASCAR is actually a very different story. You know what NASCARs look like. They kind of zoom in at all different weird angles. They show up in the pit and 7 people jump over a wall and they all run out to the car and they change wheels and tires. They fix mechanical problems. They throw gas in the car. So up until traditionally, that's always been done where you had functional teams. You had 2 tire guys. You had a gas guy. You had a mechanical guy. You had a windows guy. And they would all operate on the car and they would jump over the wall and the tire guy would try to get his tires on as fast as they could. Once they'd finished, boom, the gas guy would come in, put the gas in. And it's effectively functionally designed. And it turns out if you're trying to get a car out of the pit as fast as you can, it's not the right way to do it. So the gentleman that leads this experience, he was a football player at Stanford and got injured playing football. And so said, boy, what can I do after college that is still in the world of sports? I can't hit people anymore. So he went to NASCAR and he reinvented the pit stop and he basically changed it from being functionally oriented to where you didn't optimize for getting your job done. Again, it sounds obvious when I say it, but you optimized for getting the car out of the pit as fast as you could. What that meant was if I was the tire guy, instead of getting the tires on the car in 8 seconds, it's actually better if it's a little awkward for me to get the tires on the car and it's going to take me about 14 seconds. So my metric actually looks bad, but I literally create the physical space for the gas guy to hit the car right away. And I can get the gas in the car because that's like the long, if you will, the long pole in the tent.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple, but at work, I mean, and you know this, right? If you're in a mid-sized even organization, you've got metrics, I've got metrics. Your metrics are different than my metrics.
Yeah.
And of course, they all go up to the upper level metrics. But I think everybody, on this call knows that, if you've ever pushed metrics down, it ultimately leads to kind of some perverse incentives.
Yeah.
This experience that we do with Andy Papathan's CU and with NASCAR, it actually came out of a exercise we were doing at Stanford. And what we do is we send everybody a NASCAR, a toy one, and you will do 2 timed pit stop changes. You do it the way that you normally would, and
Cool.
then Andy will take you through what they changed in NASCAR. You'll talk about how you'd put that into place, and then you practice it, and then you'll cut your time by about 30%. So you can practice what you just learned, and you'll see the results right away.
I love that. And when we hear people talk about how specialized we've become in the workplace and how much we've removed the fun and human connection and joy from work in many roles, it's that problem. It's that everyone's optimizing for their own role and forgetting that creates chaos downstream for someone else. And now we're building workarounds, and now we're resenting each other because you put the sale in this way, which means that I have to go and do this off process task to build a client in the way that you sold the client or whatever else it is. So to think of coming together as a team to redesign the way you do work, that's an exciting principle.
It is. I think it was yesterday or the day before, it was a Wall Street Journal article. And they wrote, I can't remember, it was a very clickbaity headline along the lines of, Sweden has solved the crisis around enjoying work.
Yeah.
And they described this tradition in Sweden called fika, right? Fika, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Fika is where there's a moment of the day, cell phones down, laptops down, and you and your colleagues gather and you drink coffee. And I think you have sweets or something. That fine. Think about it as a shared coffee break that everybody has at exactly the same time.
Yep.
And it is a moment, presumably where all those people gather and convene, the sales guy and the service guy that are going to be at each other later in the day, but they will be less at each other, obviously, if they've had this sort of moment to see each other as humans. The interesting thing when you read the article, right, is it makes perfect sense if everybody in your organization works in one office, then Fika is a great idea. And obviously, it's hundreds of year old Swedish tradition. Very few companies that I know are all in one location. Very few teams are in one office, let alone one country. So, I think if you think about it, right, that what the connection-centric experiences Teamraderie does are effectively like a modern version of Fika for distributed teams.
That's neat. That's a great way to look at it. So the customers come in platform, they run these experiences, productivity engagements lifting. Have you seen this success starting to spill over into adjusting the behaviors, adjusting the ways of working in a more sort of codified way with any of your customers?
We have, right? I mean, the other day, was a CFO of a 500 person company sent me a note, and he said they have a program in place. It touches all their employees, and he said they had what they had noticed actually was that obviously they had seen a lift in their engagement scores. He said, what I notice is the change in how we give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Where we didn't used to. And he confessed to being, I'm the most suspicious guy here. I'm the CFO.
Okay. Normal CFO characteristics.
Maybe he over-indexed a little bit on the absence of trust issue, but he said, look, the thing, I noticed the most is that we've gone from believing everybody's trying to optimize for themselves, and we see each other far differently than we did before. And look, I mean, I love compliments from any customer, but I think, the hardest customer to get to say anything nice is the guy that actually writes your check, which is the CFO.
Particularly when he gives you the feedback in a non-dollar term way. He didn't say, you saved me this much money. He said, you allowed us to remove doubt from each other. That's
Or at
a
least
big step.
him to remove doubt. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So as you kind of look forward to the journey that your customers are on in your platform, and just more generally, like all of this great research that you're harnessing and how that's playing out in the world of work, what would you say your hope is for the future of teamwork, for team experiences?
It's here would be, and this is, kind of the essential thing, at least personally for me, when I was one of the co-founders, right? When I was starting it, the why for me was, I looked back on how I had been as a manager and noted that I had lots of talented people that reported to me. And I for decades, right, failed
Mm-hmm.
to get as much out of them as I could have.
Yeah.
And, real talent, good talent, everybody looks at their teams and you think you have good talent on your team. And you ask yourself, am I getting the most out of these people? And
Yeah.
Do you think I could make everybody 10% better? And of course you could. So, my hope, aspiration is we, myself included, as managers, are not as strong as we could be. And in part, we haven't spent our lives studying organizational behavior. And in
Yeah.
part, we all know human issues are hard ones. And
Yeah.
when we're one of the humans, it's really hard to be objective and effective. Look, I believe we all could be, certainly 10% better. And there at this point is really good evidence that if you give your managers just a little bit of a boost and a little bit of help in this team-based way, the team responds, and it responds really fast. And, you can argue it's the efficacy of our product. I love to make that argument. You could also argue that we're starting from a really low baseline. And I think that's actually pretty true as well. So, look, my aspiration obviously is to have that 10% impact. But I sort of believe that once you improve 10% of productivity, the next 10% actually is going to be, it's not going to be that hard to improve 10% more off of that. I just think there's a lot further we could go. And, so it doesn't feel like we've got a limit necessarily that we're going to hit anytime soon in terms of improving things.
Which I love. And that's a really great hope. It's very tight. But just think of all the downstream consequences of people going home happier, having more time for their health, innovation. It just opens up the aperture for so much more.
Really does. It really does. Yeah. And how and then as a manager, how you feel about yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? I think most of us go home and we don't feel like, boy, I really got these guys to be far more effective than they were before.
Yeah.
But, and we look at great athletic coaches and we applaud them. And if I asked you, tell me what Coach K at Duke did that was so exceptional, you'd be able to tell me. And then if I asked you well, which of those things do you model and do? I guarantee you the answer is almost none.
Yeah.
All right. Now, your talent, I would argue, is as strong and as kind of diverse in their skill set as a power forward and a shooting guard. Mm-hmm. Okay. From mm-hmm. different backgrounds. And man, there's a lot more you could do if you were a lot more like Coach K or any other athletic coach. So we see this when we look at other areas, but somehow we don't see the imperative always to go make those improvements on our own, but they're right there.
Yeah. No, that's exciting. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Michael. I think some of the big takeaways were, moving from engagement to action, to solving for the problems. I love the way that you use moments to drive that action and that epiphany effect. I keep reading more and more about that. So I think that's very real. The talking on task versus outcome and how teams can actually collectively be better, I think is really neat. I love the NASCAR example. And that piece on Amy Edmondson, driving the the right level of belonging and trust to encourage team members to be willing to ask for help. I think that's got to drive a lot of the gratitude and right practices there too. So I'm excited to see more of the impact of your product and work out there. And if any of our listeners want to learn more, how do they find you or your team?
They could go to teamraderie.com is the place to go. I'm Michael at Michal at Teamraderie. The really interesting thing to read is we did 6 companies took all of their engagement data and productivity data, so some of those stats, and it's in one white paper that's peer reviewed, interesting, really well done white paper. Great to read if you're into studying organizations, and then it gives you some real tangible ideas. So I think it's on our website, and if not, I can email it.
Yeah, I'll work with Alicia to make sure we drop that in the links too.
Awesome.
Drop the link in. Great. Thanks, Michael. I really enjoyed it.
All right, awesome. Great to talk to you, Dane.
You too.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.